Okay, you're good to go.
Hang on. Okay. Welcome anyone in attendance to the September 16th, 2020 Planning Commission meeting for North Ogden City. I'm Vice Chairman Mason. I'm standing in for Chairman Thomas today, who is asked to be excused. So I'll be conducting this meeting. We're going to start our meeting as we always do, with invocation by Commissioner Barker, followed by the recitation of the Pledge of Allegiance by Commissioner Lunt. Commissioner Barker.
Hey.
Invocation by Commissioner Barker, followed by the recitation.
Get a lot of back feed here.
Yeah, if we could maybe mute our, somebody's not muted there. That might help that. Commissioner Barker, it's all yours.
Get a lot of back feed here.
Yeah, if we could maybe mute our, somebody's not muted there.
Our Father in heaven, we come to the beginning of this Planning Commission meeting. We're grateful to be able to be a service to North Ogden City and be able to help strive to make it a good place to live, a good place to be. And bless us that we'll be mindful of who we serve and our purpose, that so the decisions we make be according to those things we best for North Ogden. Say his name, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
All right, I'll now recite the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you, everyone. I know it's some of those formalities and pleasantries are a little tough with the Zoom meeting, so I thank you for your attention to that. Let's see. We are going to start looks like every planning commissioner is here, correct? We have Commissioner Barker, Commissioner Lunt, Commissioner Waite, Commissioner Nancaro, Commissioner Arner, and myself. We do not have Vice or Chairman Thomas, as was noted earlier. I'm going to start with consideration of the minutes of our last meeting, which was on September 2nd. Before we do that, let me announce a slight procedural change to our meeting today. It was brought to my attention shortly before the meeting that our consent agenda, that's item number 6, the applicants actually requested some kind of change, which I don't know what it is. Therefore, a consent agenda is normally a more streamlined approval process, which has less discussion. For that, because of the change, I'm proposing that we change item number 6 from the consent agenda into our administrative action, I believe. Did I have that right? Okay. Can I get a second on that?
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second for the changing of item number 6 to an administrative action with a little more discussion. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that will change. Now we come to item number 2, which is our minutes consideration for the last meeting. Has anyone had a chance to review those and give us a motion or any discussion on those?
I'll make a motion that we approve the September 2nd, 2020 Planning Commission meeting minutes.
I'll second that.
Thank you, commissioners. Okay, we have a motion and a second for their approval. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, let the record show it was unanimous. Okay, we're going to now hear from our opening meeting statement, which will be read by Brandon Bell in the absence of Rob Scott.
Yeah, I guess I'm going to do it. I was trying to look for the currently adopted opening meeting statement, wasn't able to find a copy. So, but we did have this draft version that's been edited by Lynn. So I'm going to go ahead and read that. That's the best I have for today.
I support that.
So before each agenda item begins, city staff will give a report. After the staff report, the item will be open for other speakers. The applicant will speak first and be allowed up to 10 minutes. Following the applicant, any other interested person will be allowed to speak for up to 3 minutes. The applicant has final rebuttal time of up to 5 minutes. And this is for items or hearings on the agenda. Any materials that are displayed or referenced, in other words, pictures or written materials, are part of the record and must be left with the commission. Speakers are required to have signed in at the door and will state their name and address before beginning their remarks. If you agree with a previous speaker, then state your agreement to avoid repetitious remarks. Speakers shall address the commission from the podium or microphone and shall address all comments to the planning commission. Looks like I read the in-person version instead of the Zoom version, but I think you get the idea. You're on mute, Commissioner Mason.
How many times have you heard that in the past 2 months? Okay, so again, if there's anything you would like to say, we are interested in hearing your comments relevant to each item. Please use the raise your hand feature on Zoom, and we'll call on you and possibly promote you to a panelist so that you're able to ask your question. We'll ask you to state your name and address. And speaking of panelists, Lynn, I noticed we have one on here that I don't know. We have a Julian Bird.
Yeah, Julian is a new intern with our planning department. He's a student at the University of Utah and just joined us a couple of weeks ago.
Hi.
Welcome to the jungle, Julian. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Brandon, for reading our rules of procedure. And now's the time where we can disclose any ex parte communications or conflict of interest that may exist. I myself have none. Is there anyone on any commissioner who has any disclosure to make here concerning an agenda item or possibly something else? Okay, let the record note that there was no conflict of interest or ex parte communications disclosed. Item number 5 is our public comments. We reserve these for comments for something that's not on the agenda. If you'd like to comment on something specifically on our agenda tonight, we ask that you hold your comment for that item when it's more relevant. But if there's any general comments from any of our attendees, now is your time. Okay, do we have anyone, Lynn? You're shaking your head no.
Yeah, I don't see any hands raised.
Great. Okay, we'll move right along to our administrative items. Note that we're skipping this as a consent agenda. We're going to leave it as item number 6. Consideration and action for an extension of the final approval of the Northview Estates subdivision located at 3700 North and 400 East. And I'm assuming is that still going to be Kai, or who is presenting that? Evan?
That will be me.
Oh, Brandon? Okay.
Good evening, Vice Chair Mason and commissioners. So this was originally scheduled as a consent item because it was a simple extension, but I think yesterday afternoon I received an email from our city engineer indicating that the applicant had requested one minor change to the plat, and for that reason we felt that there should be the opportunity to discuss that change if there are any concerns with it. Lynn, would you be willing to bring up the modified version of the plat and then also have the old staff report from a year ago ready if needed? I don't think it will be needed, but I'd like to have it available if so. Okay, you can see, to my knowledge, there's only been one change on this plat. Well, two changes to the plat, but there's just one note and one graphic change. The note relates to the graphic change as well. If you could zoom in a little bit to the half circle that's highlighted, that would be amazing, Lynn. Thank you. So if you notice, just to the north of this highlighted half circle, there's another turnaround that's shown on the plat. There's actually 2 others. Only one's currently showing. And that is, all of those turnarounds were originally on property that was to the east of the subdivision. And the applicant's not been able to get permission from the adjoining property owner for this southernmost turnaround. And so what they're proposing is that they relocate the turnaround on lot 85, which would now be titled lot 85R. and what that would allow them to do is keep the turnaround on their property with what they're proposing is the condition that that's shown in lot 80 or note 5 for lot 85, that it be designated an R lot and that it therefore be restricted from being sold or a building permit issued until the road is extended beyond the subdivision boundary, complete with curb, gutter, and sidewalk, at which point the temporary turnaround easement is nullified. Staff in principle is fine with this change. Lauren Gardner, our city engineers, reviewed it. I also placed a call to Ryan Barker, the fire marshal. He's okay with both the location of that adjusted location of the turnaround, as well as the diameter and size of it, with two caveats. We'd like to, staff would recommend that, and these are recommended conditions of approval that we suggest be added. These are also, I've typed them up and located them in the chat if you need to refer to them, if you make a motion or not. And so what we're suggesting is that staff be allowed to work with the applicant to edit the language in note number 5 on the plat, so the lot may not be sold nor a building permit issued until the fire marshal provides approval of an alternative design for an offsite turnaround, or the fire marshal otherwise provides approval due to the road being extended beyond the subdivision boundary sufficient to meet the turnaround requirements. So for that recommended condition, what we're basically saying is that we put it at the discretion of the fire marshal, so that and put that language in or similar language in the notes, so that it indicates that it's the fire marshal's discretion, and not that's not left unclear. The second suggested condition of approval is that an additional note be placed on the plat stating that the developer needs to maintain lot 85R, including weed control, and keep it in good condition until the turnaround is removed from the lot and lot 85R is able to be sold. And so those are just a couple of technical points. We don't have an issue with the relocation of that turnaround, just the conditions for doing so. And those are again located in the chat box on Zoom. And then I would also suggest that if you do make a motion that approves the plat, that you be clear that it's the updated plat that you're approving with those conditions if you support them.
Hey, Brandon, would you mind walking me through the curb and gutter again? So, I mean, as it was approved, that we'd have curb and gutter to the end of 85R, right?
As approved, you would. Well, except for, sorry, I guess you wouldn't have it on the north side on 85R, so that they can pull onto that, but they wouldn't be able to sell the lot until the turnaround was gone. And I guess we can put that, we can put that as an additional condition. The commission could to require that the road be finished with curb and gutter and sidewalk.
Well, my only concern on this, I don't know how the rest of the commission feels, is that we'd have no curb and gutter there, because you obviously need that as a turnaround, right? And you have it on the south side of the road. And then when that lot is sold and developed, is it up to the when the home goes in, they'll put a curb and gutter in there?
Correct.
Is that?
Can I?
Yeah.
Lauren's asking to be able to speak.
Please.
This type of turnaround is consistent with our approved public works standards. We don't do it too often because we prefer to have the turnaround outside of the subdivision, but it is part of our standard drawings and it is consistent with those drawings.
So do we have teeth to ensure that when the home is built on 85R, that it gets curb and gutter? Right?
It will be escrowed as part of the monies for the improvements. Currently, they did install curb and gutter all the way through to the end of 85, but they're going to have to take it out to put this back in. But they will, according to the note and the escrow that is posted, that would guarantee that those improvements get installed.
A note can also be that condition can be added to the plat, that they can't sell the lot until curb and gutter are in, and no building permit may be issued. And we've used that in similar situations before. It was, I think Cactus Ridge had a road that was on the back of the lot, so unofficial private road, and we didn't issue building permits until that had been removed.
Yeah.
So you could add that to the plat.
A similar subdivision, the Spring Meadows, or rather the North Ogden Spring Meadows subdivision, has a very similar situation as this one. And that's the stub out of, I think, 1500 North. So it is the exact same situation as this.
Thank you. Anything else to add, Brandon?
Just a reminder that if you need to reference those conditions, 2 of the 3 that were just discussed are in the chat box.
Great, thanks. Before our discussion, it's an administrative, I'm just trying to think here. So we do want to hear from the applicant, any public comments to this. So we invite the applicant to speak to this, if they're here.
Cecil, if you'll state your name and address.
Cecil Satterthwaite. If you can hear me.
We can.
Okay, so yes, we agree with all that. And if you look on the note on number 5, it does state that no building permits or that 85R lot can be sold until the subdivision boundary complete with curb and gutter and sidewalk, at which time the temporary turnaround easement is nullified. So it is on the plat that lot cannot be sold and building permit issued until the curb and gutter and sidewalk is in. So, and then we agree with the fire marshal as well. As long as he's happy with that, then we'll do what we need to make sure they can get emergency vehicles and things turned around there. So.
Thank you, sir. Do we have any other comments from the public on this matter?
I don't see any hands.
Okay, then we move into the portion of Planning Commission discussion and a motion. Thoughts, opinions, concerns?
I'm fine with it.
Why don't we get a motion one way or another on this, and then have a discussion to that motion.
I'll take a stab at this motion. I'll make a motion that we approve an extension for final approval of the Northview Estates subdivision, Phase 7, located at approximately 3700 North and 400 East. And the conditions of approval would be the 2 bullets that Mr. Bell read, and I can read those again if you like. But one would be that the staff would be allowed to work with the applicant to edit the language in Note 5 on the plat so that the lot may not be sold nor a building permit issued until the fire marshal provides approval of an alternative design for an off-site turnaround, or the fire marshal otherwise provides approval due to the road being extended beyond the subdivision boundary sufficient to meet turnaround requirements. Additionally, a note be placed on the plat stating that the developer maintain lot 85R and keep it in good condition until the turnaround is removed from the lot and lot 85R is able to be sold. Also, that the motion that we're approving would include these 2 bullets, as well as, I'm going to restate it, even though Mr. Satterthwaite kind of said it was included in the plat, but just to be more clear, that the note that the plat include a note that the road is required to be completed with curb and gutter before lot 85R is sold. think I covered everything.
I'll second that.
Can I make Commissioner Nancarrow, can I make an amendment to your,
Please.
when you, at the very end, when you said that the road is to be completed with curb and gutter, I think that number 5 on there actually had curb, gutter, and sidewalk. Would you like to add sidewalk
Yes, please.
to that as well?
Curb, gutter, and sidewalk before the lot 85R is
So
sold.
so you accept my amendment to that?
Yes.
And
Yes, I
Commissioner
do.
Barker, was that you that seconded it?
Yep, I'll still second that.
Okay, great. Okay, we have a motion to discuss. Is there any further discussion on this?
No, I'm good with it.
Okay, given there's no further discussion, let's call for a vote. Commissioner Barker,
Yes.
Commissioner Lunt,
Yes.
Commissioner Waite,
Yes.
Commissioner Nancarrow,
Yes.
and Commissioner Arner. Commissioner Arner present?
She is.
Are you muted, Commissioner Arner? Let's see. If she's muted, she's also video muted. I can't see her.
Yeah, she's muted.
Yeah,
Map your keyboard with your palm if you agree.
Sorry,
There you go.
I was looking at the other document under this, and then I was trying to find the tab, but yes,
Okay, so you're a yes to the motion, Commissioner Arner?
yes.
Thank you. Okay, we have and I vote yes, which makes a unanimous approval. Okay, so we've given final approval, have we not? For the subdivision? Or no, have we? Did we just
Extension.
approve an extension? We approved an extension with the modifications. Thank you. Thank you. I got my wires crossed. Thank you. Okay, so we're still going to be seeing this for final approval later, correct?
No, it was an extension of final approval. So
Okay.
it already had final approval, and then they brought forth this plat with these minor modifications.
Thank you. Deal. Okay. All right. We're moving away from our administrative items now onto a presentation and discussion. There will be nothing to vote on here, if I have this correct, on a mixed use, on the concept of mixed use town centers presented by Evan Nelson. And Evan, the time is yours.
Good evening, everyone. Lynn's just pulling up a PowerPoint presentation here. We have a lot of resources in the planning world, and as staff, we felt like it would be helpful to take some time in commission meetings occasionally to share some ideas and concepts and trainings, just to help the conversation, I guess. And so today we wanted to talk about mixed use centers, and we're going to share, actually maybe go to the next slide, Lynn, and we'll just go over the outline briefly. So we have some video clips. Envision Utah did a training, a virtual training. It was about an hour and a half long, and it was very good, very interesting. And we're gonna watch some clips from that training and then have some discussion about some of those concepts. So we'll watch a few clips of videos there, then we'll look at some examples of mixed use centers in Utah. We'll talk a little bit about North Ogden City and how some of these ideas do apply or could apply to what we are working with here in town. And then we'll finish up with a video that shows the transformation that they did in Holiday, Utah, which was also part of that same training. So go ahead, Lynn. We have 3 shorter segments right here at the beginning. We'll watch those and have some conversation about it.
All right, let's get started. So welcome to the Envision Utah Quality Communities Academy. We've done this for 3 years now, where we like to talk about topics that are relevant to communities throughout Utah, thinking about how to make sure that even as we grow, we have a high quality of life for ourselves and our children and our grandchildren. Today we're going to be focusing on mixed use centers. My name is Ari Bruning. I'm the president and CEO of Envision Utah, and excited to have our slate of panelists here today to talk to us. And need to start first by thanking our sponsors of this event. We couldn't do this without them. So Daybreak Communities and Rocky Mountain Power have both stepped up to sponsor this. And today we will hear from a number of folks. Again, I'm Ari Bruning, and then we'll hear from Ted Moulton, who's the Deputy Director at the Wasatch Front Regional Council, followed by Michaela Respicio Evans in Vision, Utah, and then Megan Townsend, Paul Allred, Stephen James, and Randy Woodbury. And I'll introduce each of them as we go. So a little bit of an introduction here. We at Envision Utah, we're a 501c3 nonprofit. We've been around for 23 years now, and we were started in the late 90s by a group of concerned citizens, everybody from the governor, Mike Leavitt, to Larry H. Miller, and so forth, to look at how we grow, how we can make sure we maintain a high quality of life even as we grow. And today, the reason we're going to be talking about mixed use centers today, as we think about quality communities, dates back probably even earlier than this, but in 2015, we did a statewide visioning process we called Your Utah, Your Future, where we put together 4 different scenarios for how we could grow in Utah and brought those to the public, and over 50,000 people responded. And 80% chose one scenario. And that scenario was one that had mixed use centers throughout our communities. So we're going to talk more about what that means and why Utahns wanted that for their future. 80% it's hard to get 80% of Utahns to agree on anything. So if you think about mixed use centers, this is not a new or novel concept. These are the kinds of places that we've built historically. Our pioneer communities generally all had a walkable Main Street type of area. So this is kind of about recapturing the best of our past. Personally, I live in Daybreak, and we're going to hear a little bit about Daybreak later. But this little bakery here, I can send my 9-year-old little boy to the bakery here to get a cupcake or an ice cream cone on foot and not worry about his safety. And those are the kinds of places we're talking about today when we think about a mixed use center. And they're the kinds of places that we're seeing more and more demand for. This is a survey we did in Utah County recently, asking people what their ideal community is to live in. And you'll see, first of all, that people have a wide variety of preferences. About 50% in the blue colors there shows something pretty akin to a traditional suburb. You have another 8% who chose a small town. The other 42% chose a place a little more walkable, a little more mixed use, and we'll define what mixed use means in a minute here. You know, a place, maybe it's a place like Daybreak, maybe it's a place like a downtown Salt Lake City or Provo, or maybe it's more like the Avenues. But the 42%, that's a large number. We're asking for these kinds of places to live in. So with that,
to the surrounding community. And I know many things fit into that category, but centers really follow have three main characteristics. The first being that they are mixed use, as both Ari and Ted have touched on. Centers have housing, office, retail, civic uses, open space, etc., to help create a dynamic and appealing place. And the most important of these would be housing, to ensure that people can live nearby and destinations are easily accessible. And this is also a way to combat some of the housing affordability and provide some much needed supply of housing along the Wasatch Front. The second quality is good access to regional transportation. I think the last thing that we want to do is create an attractive place and make it hard to get to. We don't want centers to be sources of traffic, so it's very important that we ensure that people can move efficiently into, out of, and within the center. Centers also support public transportation, cycling, and walking in addition to vehicle transportation. And the third quality, the last major quality, would be that it's walkable and human scale. And this is what really makes your space welcoming and memorable to people, is the ability to explore and be able to feel engaged by your surroundings. And it's this on-the-ground experience that gives your center the opportunity to really be unique. So here's an example of, just put up some pictures of some of our most loved centers in Utah. And you see on the top left, we have downtown Provo, top right is downtown Salt Lake, and Holiday Village at the bottom. And as you can see, these places are beautiful. They're places that you want to be. And they're some of our most loved in Utah. So I know I started off with a really broad definition, so I also want to touch on what a center is not. Some places commonly mistaken for centers include shopping malls, strip malls, office parks, and light industry clusters. And while these places do have some of the qualities of centers, they don't have all of them. And typically they tend to be very auto-oriented and single use, which means they're not as accessible and not as attractive. So this is my last slide. Ari touched a little bit on Your Utah, Your Future, which was a vision for 11 different topics, including water, public lands, energy, transportation and communities, housing, education. And one of the 4 cornerstones for achieving that vision was a network of quality communities. So a network of centers throughout the region to help increase accessibility throughout Utah. And then the second major plan I wanted to discuss was Wasatch Twist 2050, which was a regional vision composed by 11 partners, including Wasatch Front Regional Council, Mountain Land Association of Governments, ELCT, and many others. So what I wanted to say is just that this is on the minds of many of the big players across the state as we look to the future of Utah. And with that, I'll give it back to Ari.
Lynn, can we pause for just a minute here?
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to give the group, the commission, as well as staff members, a chance to make any comments that you have before you forget about them when we move on to the next section of the video. Just to highlight, the first man that spoke talked about some surveys that they had done. He said that nearly 80% of the respondents were preferring mixed-use centers in future development. The other survey was in Utah County, and that one said that about 42% were preferring mixed-use type development. So do you have any comments about that, of how that might relate to North Ogden? I doubt our numbers would be quite that high, but I'm curious to hear some thoughts on that.
I just had a thought. As I was looking at a picture and listening to them talk about it, it seems like this is leaning towards the form-based code that we had going at one time. Is that true?
Some of the elements that are part of mixed-use centers align with the form-based code concept.
Okay.
I wouldn't say that, the form-based code that was proposed to the commission and the city council a couple of years ago, that was kind of a comprehensive, try this new code approach. But I guess the simple answer to your question is yes, there are similarities between that code and the type of development that is being discussed here.
Okay, that's what I was wondering.
I'll throw out a hypothesis out there. I dare guess that if a similar survey were conducted just among North Ogden residents, and depending on how it were worded, if it were worded, would you prefer to have a cool city center or a center for people to gather, or remain a bedroom community? I feel like the residents of North Ogden would probably lean towards remain a bedroom community, because that's what I hear and feel out there, is that, hey, those places are great for other places. We don't.
I hear the same thing, Brandon.
Yeah. So
yeah, Brandon, I was kind of thinking the same thing. It's like, what, when in terms of preference, is this where you're going to live and live out your days? Or is this a place you wouldn't mind visiting? Which one would you prefer to visit, or which one would you prefer to live until you die? I mean, there's a huge difference in how things are presented.
Yeah.
So I agree with that, Brandon.
Well, as for my own opinion, and I try to, represent people I hear and everything, but as for my own opinion, I would love to live close to a place like that, right? for the, hey, go down, let's walk down and get an ice cream and a whatever, grab a coffee, whatever down here, and I'd like to live close to a place like that, but not in one. But I don't think that has been very desirable for North Ogden residents. I think we saw that with form-based code. I think that, a lot of the fear that, hey, do we really want this here? Bled over in form-based code, like what Commissioner Barker was alluding to.
Hey, Evan, has any of this information been presented to members of the city council?
No, this has not. This is, you guys
Okay,
have.
because this kind of flies in the face as we're talking about the south side of 2700, as we're talking about the other places. We've got members of the city council that says absolutely not. We are not doing mixed use, it's straight commercial.
Well, I think what Evan's telling, what we're watching here is a presentation by Envision Utah that's showing us data, right? And they're saying, hey, the majority of people in Utah said this. Well, we don't have any information of what the residents of North Ogden want. So I'm still interested in, without beating this up, I'm still interested in hearing what the presentation's about.
Well, I'm very interested because so much of the world is developed this way, where there's mixes of ice cream stores, little corner markets, restaurants. I mean, you watch TV. I mean, they ran Cheers for like 20 years, the neighborhood bar. Imagine how many drunk drivers would get off the road if they could just walk to their bar. I mean, we have this idea that everything has to be just separated, and you lock this group and this is high density, lock them in this quadrant of the city. This is low density, we lock them away in their quadrant of the city. And the entire time I've been on the planning commission, this is kind of, and then when we talked about home occupations, it's like, if you can't do it on a computer, you really have a hard time doing it because you might disturb the sanctity of the city. And yeah, I think this is great stuff to be talking about, but I think the conversation needs to extend beyond the planning commission. This is probably a good place to start, though.
Don, you're talking about the housing and that. A lot of people approached me. They're very upset and very disheartened by the high density housing going to North Ogden because they like the bedroom community feel. And we're moving away from that. And some people are not real happy about it.
In my opinion, sorry to cut you off, Commissioner Wade. In my opinion, the biggest driver to the bedroom community, though us losing that, has to do with the increase in population, which is, I don't think it has as much to do with the way we've initiated our urban planning as much as that North Ogden is in flux in it. I mean, we've grown from 5,000 to 20,000 residents in my lifetime. And I think that's inevitable that it loses that bedroom feel. When I drive down Washington, when I drive down 2600, I try to take a left at 5 o'clock into Smith's. You're like, well, that bedroom community's gone,
It is.
And so I think something like this is a nice trade-off. This is a hot take, right? But meaning, okay, if your bedroom community's gone, what fills that void for you? And I think it's cool spaces, cool access to the mountains, the things that still make North Ogden cool. And so I'm sort of in favor of this, but I know I was in favor of form-based code also. I voted against it because I didn't think it represented what the average person in town wanted, as was evident by the public comments. But I appreciate your opinions, though, absolutely, and would love to hear more. Commissioner Long, Commissioner Arner, Commissioner Nancaro. And I believe I cut Commissioner Wade off if you want to finish your thought there. Don,
no, I can't remember what I was going to say.
That's because I talked so long. That's a tactic.
Yeah, I forgot it all.
I think it's interesting. I'm not a long-term resident of North Ogden. I've moved here like 8 years ago, and I've been on the planning commission almost 5. And during that time, I think it's really interesting because I was fascinated by this whole form-based code and really having a future vision how we can set planning pieces in place now to think about what we want our city to look like 10 years from now, 20 years from now, before some of this development, some of these old lots on Washington Boulevard are developed. Maybe we could put some building blocks in place to ensure that it's going to be something beautiful and nice. And, along the way, we've added a lot of high density housing, particularly down there at that 1700 corridor. Now all the stuff that's being built sort of beyond the pool there on Patriot Point, or I think that's the name of it. A lot of high density housing where there's going to be people walking. Now is the time to build that. What happened to all that, how it all collapsed, I don't know. It seemed like everybody was excited about it, and maybe it's just not what the city council wanted. And that's really maybe based on the feedback that they got from the residents of North Ogden. So as wonderful as I think it might be to do that, it might be because of, the knowledge and the training that Mr. Bell brought us all through, and, kind of got us all excited about this vision. And I don't know, I just sort of felt like it just all collapsed. The minute they said, oh, well, we got, somebody wants to build a car wash, throw it in there. It was just like, all right, forget about it. But
we recommended, we, the planning commission recommended that the city council not adopt the form-based code.
Yeah, I don't think I was there during that time, but I agree. I probably would have agreed with whatever you guys wanted to do. But whether we did the form-based code specifically, kind of the vision behind where we were going with the form-based code is exactly what we're talking about right now, is this sort of walkable, commercial mixed use area. The fact is we're going to have thousands of people living in apartments and townhouses and things down at that 1700 corridor that could walk to some beautiful area. But I've always been concerned from day one about the lack of commercial, like small businesses and things that come to North Ogden and stay in North Ogden, are successful in North Ogden. My feeling is most of us go to Riverdale to shop and eat in restaurants and things like that, because that's where it is. There's not much to stay here for other than go grocery shopping, so that's just my thought. Is I love the idea of this sort of city center, but if that's not what the residents want through all of these surveys and drills and things that we've done over the last 5 years, then maybe we ought to look at something else. I guess I'm gonna let somebody else comment.
Yeah, I was going to say, Nicole, all you need to do is go park your car, or go down to stand at the corner of 2600 in Washington on Friday at 5 and 6 o'clock, as everybody is leaving town to go find some other place to spend their money.
So I'm glad that Nicole mentioned Riverdale. Riverdale is a place where a lot of our residents spend money. But I'd like to point out what we experience in Riverdale. Riverdale is a lot of commercial development that is basically entirely built around the automobile. And so you don't really go to Riverdale as much for an experience as you do for something you need. You need food, you need shopping, you need Walmart, you need Target. And so you go there because you need something. You don't go there because you want to have a unique experience necessarily. And I think our current codes are really set up in a way that development in the future in North Ogden will tend to be quite similar to what we see in Riverdale today. So, if Riverdale is sort of what we like or what we want to see, I feel like our codes right now are adequate to get us closer to what Riverdale is. And as development occurs, I think that's what we'll see. If our residents want something different, something that is not necessarily auto-oriented, something that is more walkable, something that's more experience-based, more human scale, then our codes are not adequate to create that type of development. So I think it's good to be asking the questions and kind of looking ahead into the future to what path we're on right now and where it will lead. And if our residents do prefer, the Riverdale style of development, then, that's totally fine. That can be. And, a lot of the development in Riverdale is still quality development. It's just a different experience than what you would experience in like the old town of Park City, for example. And so I think these are great conversations to be having right now, rather than just allowing development to occur without really talking about it. So.
Evan, I completely agree with you. And I stated such that I supported that. It's one of the reasons I supported form-based code, right? I mean, personally, I didn't support it. I voted against it, okay? But I just have a concern with how many different times we can package a similar idea and try to sell it to the public when they show up in droves and say, hey, we don't want this, right? Is it really ethical to then say, okay, we didn't like that, but what about, just with a bow on it? Do you know what I mean?
Sure.
I take this from something Brent Taylor told me one time, because the citizens here voted down a covered pool a number of times. And that gets brought up all the time by somebody who wants it. And he just was of the opinion at the time that it was unethical to keep presenting that for vote when they've already shown up and cast their vote. And that some amount of time would need to expire before we can repackage that and try to present it again. Do you see what I'm saying? Let's vote on it until it gets passed, kind of a thing. That's my concern with carrying this much forward. I mean, I love the discussion. I love the education on it. But to actually put pen to paper, I don't know. I don't really want to have a discussion with the city council and the mayor on their thoughts on it first, probably. Sure. Myself. I don't know how you guys do it.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable. You do represent the people, and the council represents the residents here. So,
but I completely agree with you. And the other thing that I don't think the average person that votes against this knows is, in the same breath, many of them say you're going to turn this town into Riverdale Road, right? But what the reality is if it's going to turn into Riverdale Road, it's going to turn into Riverdale Road, right? Like, because it's zoned commercial, and the big box stores could come in if they wanted, and it will look exactly like Riverdale Road. But what I'm hearing from you is, with a different vision, then those stores would change, right? And they would come, but they wouldn't look like Riverdale Road.
So if I could just interject a thought. I don't know exactly how to say this, but I think, what you're saying is very valuable. I think another perspective that needs to be considered, though, is that we do have the general plan, which has been adopted, and it does talk about things like concepts like mixed use and walkability and these types of centers. There's a number of different ways to achieve these types of centers. I think, as Evan tried to make clear earlier, form-based code isn't the only way. And I certainly take your point about, the ethics of presenting this under different packages or a number of times. But we also have the counterweight of the general plan, which, we're trying, we have to keep in mind and either work to be faithful to, or look at amending that. But there's the public that shows up and expresses their opinion, and that may or may not be reflective of the general populace. But there's also an adopted document that reflects the official public will, so to speak, of the people, and that does talk about a lot of these concepts. I think it's fair to say independent of form-based code specifically. So I'm not I hope it doesn't come across as me advocating for this, because I'm not. I'm just thinking through your statement and think this sticking point of the general plan talks about these concepts. And so, how do we either execute a general plan faithfully or find a new path forward with that general plan. I'm not assuming that the first is the only option. The second point that I would make is that, so it's been, I think, a year and a half since, a little less than a year and a half since the vote on the form-based code. And since that time, there's been the concept of walkability has come up repeatedly in public meetings of people saying, well, we want North Ogden to be walkable. We want North Ogden to be walkable. And as I've reflected on that, I've thought, well, there's a professional definition of walkability, which relates pretty closely to mixed use centers and parking behind the buildings. That's a very crude summary, but it seems like there may be a different definition that a lot of people in North Ogden City are using, which is, they just want a large sidewalk with trees or pleasant landscaping, even if the buildings are set back farther and they have a parking lot between the sidewalk and the building. I keep hearing that at least some people are mentioning this concept of we want walkable. And so maybe there's a point at which we have to put pen to paper and say, this is what walkable means to North Ogden City. So I guess I'll just leave those two thoughts, and if anyone wants to respond, they're more than welcome.
Brandon, I think it's
the hill that makes
I think that's exactly right, because in my opinion, the public opinion is at odds with itself, basically, in North Ogden, where we can go out and present, topics or ideas, and people look at that and say, yeah, it seems like a great idea. But then when it comes down to the execution, it's then realized that, oh, wait, that idea not only would be cool for me to go visit, but if it's cool for me to go visit, then it's going to bring people from outside North Ogden, which is going to increase traffic, which is going to cause problems. And then it's over because then everybody hates it all of a sudden. So I don't know what kind of education we can do to help people understand, I guess, the implications of the things they're voting on and talking about in the first place, because a lot of these things, I'm a big fan of mixed use and walkability, but at the same time, I kind of agree with Brandon Mason that I wouldn't want to live in it, though. It's the kind of place I like to go on vacation, is to the places like that, where there's cool things to see and do. But I like to have a little bit of land and a yard. But there are a lot of people out there that would like to live there. I do, and I understand that as well. It's just seems, especially here in North Ogden, it's a big challenge. We'll hear, people coming and talking about wanting it to be walkable, but then in the next breath, they don't want any new people around or any additional traffic. And I don't know how to balance that.
I like your point, Commissioner Lunt, because it brings me back to what Evan was talking about, is like, if we do nothing, then we end up like Riverdale Road. And so I think if the education of people that you refer to is, okay, which would you prefer? Because either one of these visions, whether it's this beautiful city center or a mixed use type of thing that draws in restaurants and, businesses that support North Ogden and others, or if it's big box stores along 2600 that draw in North Ogden people or others. Either way, you get to the same traffic, you get to the same people coming here, but how do you educate them of like, what do you want people coming here to experience? Does that make sense? I feel like I'm rambling, but when you say, how do you educate people, it's like, progress is going to come here because just how much we're growing. It's just a matter of what kind of businesses or attractions do we want to draw? What do we want to have here in your backyard? Do you want Target, or do you want like this beautiful city center that has like walkability and a place for people to hang out? Because either one of those is going to draw people from outside the city.
Go ahead.
I wonder, did we did we start moving in this direction with the creation of a civic zone, right? And maybe when we talk about mixed use, we think about, oh, residential, commercial. But what if the civic zone had some mixed use components to it? You see what I'm saying? And so it's a city-owned plaza with some mixed usage. I don't know, just spitballing stuff.
The question for the planning staff. Every time I hear, we use the term like walkability. Brandon mentioned that. Well, what's walkability? Everybody has a different idea. Mixed use. What is the definition of mixed use? Is it a combination of what's residential and commercial? And, the other Brandon Mason said, okay, is it civic and residential? I don't know that we even have a definition of what mixed use means. Is it, I've lived places before where there is light industrial mixed with residential. So people get up and walk to work, and then they'll stop on the store, stop at a corner shop and grab something to eat, grab some groceries on the way home from work. What does mixed use mean?
So I think a lot of those questions will be answered in the rest of the presentation, but I think what you'll find, we're going to look at a few different communities in Utah and what they have done. I think you'll find that different communities have their own flavor of mixed use, or even their own definition of what that means to them. And mixed use in Sugar House, we're going to look at some photos from Sugar House. It looks a lot different there than the photos we'll see in Bountiful City, for example. So I think as you look at these, just kind of take mental notes. What do you like? What do you not like? And hopefully seeing this mixed use concept applied in different ways can help us to realize that maybe there's a concept for North Ogden that would work really well for our residents. Even though they may have said no to the form-based code, or some residents said no to it, there may be a version of mixed use that would work really well. And maybe it's commercial with residential, maybe it's commercial with office, maybe it's some other variety. But from what I've seen so far, there are endless possibilities of combinations that could be classified as mixed use. And each community kind of figures out what's going to work well for them. So this next video is a segment that gives a little more defining of what these mixed use centers are made up of. And then after we hear that part, we'll talk about a few communities in Utah that have done some developments like this.
There are three key ingredients that, regardless of the scale of a center, all of these things, all of these centers have in common, and that is that they are walkable. Maybe they have smaller block sizes, or maybe there are treatments to the streets like trees and things that make it nice to be there, nice to walk there. They are concentrated. They're more concentrated than the surrounding area, and it's all relative. This doesn't mean that centers are dense. It doesn't even mean that they have any kind of a vertical element. They can be one story. It's just that they're the center of activity for wherever they are. And as Ted noted, this can take a density pressure off of the surrounding area. So where you may have lots of single family neighborhoods surrounding, or even a lot of open space, if you're able to concentrate some of those services and retail uses in your center or your downtown, this can take some of the pressure off of the rest of your city. And last of the three ingredients, these centers all have a mix of uses. It's different for every center. Again, it's all relative what those uses may be. But while you might have just retail in some parts of an area, or just residential elsewhere, maybe all of those things and more are present in your center, like office or flex space, maybe venues or civic space as well. Okay, now the Wasatch Coast Regional Vision has 4 different scales of centers that are kind of contextually appropriate for Utah and for the Wasatch Front. And those are a metropolitan center, of which the vision currently claims 1, Salt Lake City, downtown Central Business District, an urban center, a city center, and then the smallest of those is a neighborhood center. So I'll talk about the differences of those. So again, metropolitan center, think Salt Lake City, Central Business District. You know, who knows, maybe a few more of these will pop up. There's some competition both north and south of Salt Lake City. But as of now, you know, this is where our center of activity is in this metro area. And the catchment, and I'll talk about the catchment of these different center scales. The catchment of a metropolitan center is, you know, the entire metro area. And that's how many people the center draws periodically. For some, it may be very infrequent that they visit the metropolitan center. Some people may live, work, and dine there and hardly ever leave because there's plenty to do. The entire metro area is the potential catchment for a metropolitan center. The amount of stories or kind of the building massing in a metropolitan center is probably at least 4 in the true Central Business District and up to 25 or beyond. This is where a skyscraper might be. And then the land use, you know, we use these in the Wasatch Trace Vision typologies. We use land use indicators to kind of help us gauge what a center scale might be. And so the land use indicator for a metropolitan center is unique destinations. In Salt Lake City, we have Temple Square, we have the Broadway Theater, there are many cultural centers. All of these things you may find scattered throughout the state, but you find them clustered in the Salt Lake City Central Business District or a metropolitan center. Stepping down the scale a little bit is the urban center. This is a rendering of South Salt Lake. I like this rendering because I think it shows the scale of an urban center really well. This is along the S line. Some of this is in progress, some not so much yet, but this center shows that it's very walkable. You see lots of little people. The catchment area of a urban center might be about 100,000 people. That's the population forum for reference. And the building massing or the amount of stories might be anywhere from 4 to 10 stories. Again, this is all relative to the place. There are a lot of more tourism economies in our state, and they have what you might call an urban center that's smaller. And the land use indicator for an urban center is that it has significant commerce and regional retail. So maybe several services, you know, more shopping than just grocery, those kinds of things. Next up is our city center. This is an image in West Jordan of an up and coming city center, I would call it, at Jordan Valley Station. The city center is a really good fit for transit-oriented development, and I'll get into why. You can walk safely here. You can use transit to get there. You can also park pretty easily. You know, you see some surface lots for those folks that live in those apartments. The catchment area of a city center might be 25,000 people. Again, could be more, could be less. This is just a way to kind of put your thumb on it. And 25,000 people is the population of Farmington. The building massing or stories might be 2 to 5 for a city center, and the land use indicator could be grocery, restaurant, civic, retail. Everyday uses is what I like to think of city centers as having, and things that you might really like to access via transit. Pick up groceries on the way home, stop at a restaurant on your lunch break, dropping your ballot at the city hall, those kinds of uses. And finally, the neighborhood center, and think local here. This example is in Salt Lake City. It's one of my favorite neighborhood centers at 15th and 15th. This is not dense, or it's not vertically dense. It's single story uses. You have a gallery here. You have a bookstore, the King's English. You have restaurants, some tucked away in the back. And there's even a couple of chain restaurants in here, but they feel really local. The catchment area for a neighborhood center could be just 2,500 people. Really, it's just the neighborhood. There are some really attractive neighborhood centers in our state that I think attract much more than just the neighborhood, because you want to walk there, you want to be there, especially right now. We're just trying to find a nice place to take a walk. It could be 1 to 3 stories, maybe bigger, depending where you are. But it doesn't have to be dense. And the land use indicator here is just some retail, maybe even just civic uses. And I like to say think local. Last thing I'll leave you with here is that, it doesn't matter what the scale of the center is. Make it work for your community. I have a photo on the left of Kanab. I really like that photo. And on the right of Moab. Whatever the center is, just make it work for your community. A center is and always should be evolving. That's how they survive, and local planning and policies can both support that evolution as well as help you to maintain the character of a city center. So with that, I'll turn it back to Ari. Stop sharing my screen.
Okay, Lynn, thank you for getting those videos up there for us. Now we're going to talk a little bit about some examples. I just have 3 examples in this PowerPoint of some mixed use centers in Utah. So the first one you can see is Sugar House. Lynn, can you put that in presentation mode?
Where is that?
It's down at the bottom. There we go.
It was on the top.
Okay, now scroll down to Sugar House.
Let's see.
Okay, that's good. Okay, so we have just some aerial images here that are overlaid with some colors. This isn't a perfect science, it's just kind of a general observation. But you can, and I didn't put a key on here, but the red color symbolizes commercial areas. The blue is housing, I guess is multifamily housing. And the purple is mixed use, which may include commercial, residential, office, medical, those kinds of things. And then green is open space or park space, recreation sorts of things. So you can see the big green. Oh, and then, sorry, I didn't mention, on the right side of that green park is a high school. And so the civic uses are shaded in kind of a tan color. So you can see Sugar House Park. They have a huge park there right next to the high school. And then there's a busy road that separates the park from this mixed-use town center. Sugar House is an older commercial center in Salt Lake City. And part of their old commercial district is still there, but they have evolved over time. A lot of this commercial center actually is automobile oriented. And it seems like in more recent phases of the development of this area, they have moved more toward walkability and mixed use. They do have some several story multifamily buildings. And by the way, just a caveat, as we talk about this, this is not the planning department saying, this is what we want to see in North Ogden. This is really just conversation to say, this is what Sugar House has done, then we'll jump to Brigham City, then we'll jump to Bountiful. So these are just concepts. We're not pushing any certain idea. One thing that I really loved about Sugar House, you see the big green space where Sugar House Park is, and then there's this smaller green rectangle on the other side of the busy road. So they actually put a tunnel underneath that road to connect Sugar House Park with the mixed use center. And when you're standing inside of, well, actually, maybe we should go to the next slide, Lynn, and I'll show a picture of that. Okay, so there's a picture. When you're standing inside of that smaller green area, you actually kind of feel like you're out in the middle of a forest. And I was really impressed with how they were able to carry nature into the center of their mixed use area. Surrounding this natural place, there's a hotel, there are some office buildings, there are some commercial spaces. And anyway, it's pretty impressive. This natural area is actually a creek that runs through there. Parley's Creek, I think is what it's called. And so they've just built their center around this creek and did a pretty good job of mixing nature with their development. Okay, next slide, Lynn. So this is an image. This is a picture of a creek, but I don't think this isn't the natural creek. I think this is a man-made version. But they still tried to carry that theme throughout the development. So you can see Old Navy in the background and some other store. I can't read what that one says. And there's a restaurant to the right. Where this Old Navy is actually is more of an auto-oriented sort of development, but they have the natural elements that kind of flow through. Okay, next slide, Lynn. More of that man-made creek that flows through a couple of commercial buildings in that picture. Next slide. So this, you can see in the map, I put a blue star to show where the picture is. This is just to the south of that natural park area. This is actually a senior living multi-family sort of development with mixed use on the ground level. This is a lot of stories. I think it's 8 or 9 stories, so it's very tall and imposing. But this is one of the more recent developments that they've done in Sugar House, I believe. It looked like it was fairly new. Anyway, so that's part of this development. Next slide. This is another. It looks like it's a pretty new part of it as well. Several stories of residential with commercial on the main floor. And this big building, so if you look at where the blue star is, it shows you where this building is. And just across the street to the right, there's a little tan section, which is an old library. So part of the mix of uses in Sugar House is that they have a library that's kind of in the heart of all of this development. Okay, next slide. This is a section of housing. This part is not mixed use. It's really just housing, I think condominiums. But I wanted to show this picture to show with walkability, the architecture was built in this case to where the front doors of these condos is just a few feet away from the sidewalk. So that was part of their design. Next slide. This is a picture of part of the older commercial area in Sugar House, where they had the buildings right up on the sidewalk, and some mature street trees help make that a pretty nice place to walk around. Next slide. So Sugar House got its name from the sugar beets, and so whoever was part of planning this area decided to highlight the history, and they did some public art. There were, I think, 3 or 4 of these sculptures that were scattered around. to make a connection with the history of the area. Next slide. And then this is a mural that was painted on the side of one of the buildings that shows what Sugar House used to look like. And you can see that this part of Sugar House looks like it was developed with the automobile in mind. Where that car is right in the middle of that driving or parking area, that part is now a plaza, a pedestrian plaza. So the monument sits right on the edge of the current road. And then to the right, there's a big plaza there. And of course, the buildings have changed a lot over the years. All right, next slide, Lynn. So that was a highlight of Sugar House. Brigham City is a mixed-use center. It retains a little more of its historical feel. There hasn't been a whole lot of modern development, but there seems to be some improvements going on there. I don't have a lot of pictures of this, but we'll take a look at the next slide. It shows the map and the mix of uses. Again, the red is commercial areas. The blue is housing. The purple is a mixture of uses, which in this case is mostly commercial. There's a little bit of residential mixed in with that commercial, not a whole lot. I think there's quite a bit of office space that's tied in there as well. A dentist office, eye doctor, that sort of thing. The tan parts, you can see where the county courthouse is, which is right next to the library and the city hall. And then across the street from that is I think it's a district court and a motor vehicle division building. To the top of that, there's a tan area that's actually a museum next to a park. The yellow areas in this image are religious. So you have the temple and the tabernacle, and then some churches that are part of that mixture of uses. So, when Brigham City was developed, a mixed use approach was kind of the default. That's the way they did it. If you do mixed use in our day and time, it has to be something that's more deliberate and orchestrated because it's not the default anymore. Lynn, if you can go to the next slide. There's a picture of downtown Brigham City. And we're gonna attempt to, why don't you click on that, Lynn, and see if it'll link us over to the Google map. We weren't sure if this was gonna work or not.
Can you see it?
Nope. We still see the slide. So there's the Google image of downtown Brigham City. Yeah, if you can just rotate that and we can see what it looks like today. So most of these buildings are quite old, but they've just kind of modified them over the course of time. You have the courthouse there in the background. So when we talked about Sugar House, now we took a look at Brigham City. There's a huge difference in what we see and experience in Sugar House compared to what we see and experience in Brigham City. And so just take note of those differences. And I think it's fair to say that in both cases, we're looking at mixed use. So there really is not just one flavor of mixed use when we're talking about that term. All right, go ahead.
I'm very, very, very familiar with Brigham City. So when you're saying mixed use, in this case, again, it's not a mix of residential and commercial because there's very, very little residential in the downtown area.
Right.
And a lot of those businesses are really struggling still now to maintain viability.
Yes, that's true. They
It's
change
kind
up.
of in fact, it's almost a depressed area.
A lot of them are standing empty.
Yeah.
Yeah, there are some vacancies. There's a rotation, you know, some come and some go, some stay, some don't.
I would say the depressed nature of Brigham has more to do with the industry outside of Brigham that pulled out 20 years ago than does the
Well,
the
it's
architecture, though.
yeah.
I mean, agreed. I hear what you're saying, but I mean, you know, Dicol going away. I mean, that's why Brigham City's depressed. It's because the whole town.
A lot of it too is people would leave again, as they do in North Ogden. They leave because everybody went shopping in Ogden. Nobody would go shopping in the stores, shops, all but disappeared. They couldn't compete with Ogden, and now Ogden can't compete with the internet.
Well, then the south side of Brigham City is pretty haphazard too.
It really is. Yeah, it's really hit and miss. I think it's fascinating that this is being shown as an example. I really appreciate that because it is a different perspective than what I expected.
Commissioner Barker, when you said the south side, are you talking about where Walmart is, or is that some other part you're referring to?
Well, it's down where Shopco was. You get down to that area before, is it 1100?
Oh, okay.
Going up Logan.
Yeah, that's true. It's kind of a mixed bag there.
You go even on the south end of Main Street. That would be, you know, all the way down to the 7th South. 7th South, you know, there used to be, you know, Smith's and Shopco. The Shopco is actually closer. It's just on the west side of where the old Indian school was. Utah State has taken over some of that space.
Right.
Anyway, yeah, that also is pretty haphazard. Where there's some commercial, a few restaurants that are struggling in that area too.
Right. But you compare that to Sugar House. So I've been in Sugar House quite a few times working on the Sprague Library. And that area there is just a nightmare. I always dreaded going into there to work on that library.
Well, it's still under construction, so maybe you'll still get another chance to go.
I might do, because the guy has me working. He's still working on the stairs and stuff. So we'll see.
Okay. One other comment on Brigham City. You know, they have on 1100 South, the Walmart is there, and then there's still development. The America First Credit Union that was in downtown Brigham City closed down, and they built a new building on 1100 South. So really the center of economic activity in Brigham City has just shifted over to where Walmart is. And that area is becoming, you know, kind of like a Riverdale Road sort of development too. But that's become the economic center. While the old downtown is, I would still call it a center, but it isn't the heart of the economic activity any longer. But what it does have going for it is the charm. And so Brigham City has an opportunity to capitalize on that history, architecture, charm to create, you know, experiences that people can't get at Walmart. And you know, they're making an effort to do that. They have some funding from the state that they're trying a new program. So there are things happening to try to improve their situation, but it certainly isn't easy. And in some ways it isn't natural, because the default is to move more toward the Walmart sort of model right now. Okay, do you want to look at Bountiful? I really appreciate this example of Bountiful because I feel like it's a a small case study. It's not a grand, unthinkable, complicated project. It's fairly simple. So here's a map of Bountiful, and I have it oriented so that the top of this map is the east, is facing east. And there's a major road on the left, a major road on the right, and both of those roads connect over to the I-15. And then I made a note at the bottom, just to the west of this map, there's a Costco, a Lowe's, an At Home, an Office Depot that are right along the edge of the I-15. So you can see that Bountiful has kind of that auto-oriented area along the freeway. And then it's really not too far, several blocks away, that you come to their more historic Main Street area. And that's what we have highlighted here with the colors. Again, the red shows the commercial areas. The green is mixed use. The tan is civic sort of uses. The green is parks, and the yellow is religious. The old Bountiful Tabernacle is right there in the heart of their old downtown. So let's go to the next slide and see a few images here. So here's a picture of kind of the heart of the downtown of Bountiful. And I don't really know the history of this development project. I don't know if it was a remake of what was there or if they just tore everything down and built completely new. But you can see they have commercial on the main floor, and then they have 2 floors of residential up above. There's a balcony, or maybe a few balconies across the development. And so they've attempted this concept kind of on a small scale. This isn't a huge development, but they tried to do this mixed use. And from what I could tell, it seems to be working okay for them. When I was there, they were having a big sidewalk sale. All the businesses had their stuff out on the sidewalk. And I did see people, I saw a man out on that balcony. So somebody actually lives there from what I could tell. Anyway, so there's that picture. Sorry, go back one, Lynn. If you look through the center of those kind of down that street, you can see a building in the distance. Those, we'll see a closer up image of that, but those are condo buildings, just residential, they seem like they're kind of part of the same development, but no commercial there, yet they're close enough to the commercial district that it's an easy walk to get to the center of town there.
Okay. Comment while I'm thinking of it. Sorry.
Sure.
I was just up in Rexburg, Idaho, and I hadn't been downtown Rexburg for a long time, and you know, it's different than North Ogden, right? I mean, obviously there's a university there, right? Like Rexburg's different, but these buildings totally remind me of what's going on in Rexburg right now. Rexburg's like flat and very, very much bedroom community feeling, except for the university, right? And then they've incorporated these things in Rexburg, right down around the university. And so you go from neighborhoods to abrupt 4-story, sometimes buildings like this with the shop, you know, there's a Subway in the bottom or a Jimmy John's or something, and then people living above it. And it felt very urban for like a block or two, you know, and it's just like, but the contrast with what happens on the other side of those buildings, which is just single family residential, to all of a sudden go into that 4-story was quite striking. And I would encourage us to take a look at something like that before we got too serious about it. And I sorry to cut your presentation off. I just was struck with that thought, and I wanted to get that out there. But I think it's an interesting comparison to our city, although Rexburg itself isn't, right? We don't have a university, blah, blah, blah. But man, to go from single family to all of a sudden buildings that look just like that was a little striking. And that's how it would play in North Ogden, I think. And I'm not saying that's good or bad, but it's something I think we should experience.
Okay. Yeah, I've seen those up in Rexburg too. And you're right, going from a single family straight to a 4 or 5 story building, that's a pretty big jump. So there could probably be some strategy as part of the transition from single family to multi-story, multi-family.
Economically, I think it works in Rexburg, but think about who they're catering to, right? You've got students living there. Those aren't long-term residents up above the stores. I don't think. I would imagine they're university people that
Right,
are
yeah.
there for 4 years at the most. And so,
Right. Okay, next slide. This is just another angle of the same building. So you can, and another angle of the same building. I feel like the architecture of these is pretty good. I feel like they use some high quality materials and you know, articulation in the building, and I think they did a good design, a good work on the design of this project. This is the building we saw off in the distance. You've got front doors pretty close to the sidewalk, and then there's parking around the back side. So next slide. There's a picture of the tabernacle, and then right in front of the tabernacle is just kind of a big open grassy area with trees. So it kind of makes a really nice, just open space for gatherings. Next slide.
Evan, do you know who owns that? I mean, is that owned by a church or is that owned by the city?
I believe the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints owns that still.
I've heard of them.
The city owns this though. This is just right across the street from the tabernacle, and this is really an interesting project that the city has done. That they just, I don't know if they're totally done yet. When I took this picture, they still had the area fenced off because it was under construction. But this is actually an ice skating, I think they call it an ice ribbon, kind of like an ice rink, but it's more of an ice pathway that you know, forms a loop. And so in the wintertime, they'll put water on it and freeze it, and the recreation department, I guess, or recreation district will operate this ice rink. So, and then in the summertime, they have kind of an amphitheater and grassy area where they can have community gatherings or celebrations. There's actually
selling tickets for go-karts around that thing in the summer.
Hey, now we're talking. That's not a bad idea. Or even roller skating, I guess. There's actually a Fizz, the building, the small building in the back there. I think that's the one. Anyway, one of those buildings, the city partnered with Fizz, I guess, to have Fizz open up a shop there. And anyway, so that's kind of a creative approach. And I think the logic here is the city recognized the need to have amenities close to the downtown, and that was a kind of a key piece of their mix of uses. So as they hold events here at this central civic space, that's going to help support the commercial areas of their downtown. And then it also creates an experience. So it's not just going downtown to buy something you need, but there's actually an experience that you have when you're there. So it'll be interesting to see how that all works. I'm kind of curious about the ice ribbon and how that will work out, but it sounds pretty fun. Okay, next slide. Okay, so that's the end of Bountiful. So maybe before we jump into talking about North Ogden, we'll just open it up, and if any of you have comments about the slides we've looked at, Sugar House, Brigham City, Bountiful, you're welcome to make any comments that you'd like. Okay. If there are no comments, then I guess we should talk about North Ogden. This slide shows a land use map of North Ogden City, you know, just mainly the areas adjacent to Washington Boulevard. I'd like to thank Kai. Kai did all of the work on this map. He created this map. It's not a zoning map and it's not a general plan map. It's a map of what we think is actually being, what these parcels are actually being used for in the present. So the red is commercial, the blue is institutional, green is agriculture, light green is parks and recreation, and then yellow and orange are different housing types. So in the presentation, in the video, one of the videos we watched, the lady highlighted three main characteristics of mixed use, or of mixed use centers. So the first one is a mix of uses: commercial, residential, office, civic, recreation, or health related. Also, she mentioned access to transportation, and then she mentioned walkable design that is human scale. So I thought we could just spend a little bit of time talking about North Ogden and the center we have. We usually talk about downtown and Southtown. We sort of have two centers or two parts of the center. I just wondered if you have any comments about the current state of things on mix of uses, transportation, or walkable design, or any comments about what you would like to see as this corridor continues to develop.
I was thinking a little bit about it, you know, again, coming back, talking about Brigham City and all of the development on 11th South. Well, usually, and I kind of watched this over the years in Ogden too, is the city center seems to focus on, or development focuses on affordable property. And this is all going to be changing. I mean, the reason why in Brigham City they went from downtown and started building is they had large blocks of ground that was reasonable. Ogden City had the same thing happen. You know, couldn't buy large blocks of land, so they went, the car dealerships all left Ogden City, went out on Wall Avenue, then came along, you know, Kmart, after Kmart, then Newgate Mall. The Newgate Mall is still there struggling. And then it kind of just kept extending out into Riverdale. It seems to be a chase of affordable property. And once we get built out, then it's a new game. And I'm not sure what that game is. I think that's kind of where some of this stuff is. I mean, and you look at Bountiful City, you have there, the slides you were showing was the old downtown part of Bountiful, but all the development's really out on Fifth West. That's where all of the industry, or where all of the commercial areas are. Up on the downtown area, you've got a few antique stores and boutique markets. It's all really, you know, it's interesting. Now, Bountiful it truly is mixed use by most everybody's definition. There is housing as well as commercial, but it's all niche markets. Everything up on Main Street. All of the heavy hitters and all of the real commercial developments out along Fifth West. But again, I think it was because of large blocks of affordable property. But I said those are all going away. There's not much left in North Ogden. Ogden City, I mean, everything is, the urban sprawl has pretty well wiped all of that out.
So as you think about that, I think those are great comments. Bountiful City seems like they're trying to do both. They're trying to have their, you know, commercial center. They have plenty of auto-oriented development there, but then they also have kind of designated this other section of town where they want that section to be mixed use. And so I think that's an interesting concept to think about, where they're trying to balance two. And maybe Brigham City is in that same category as well, where they're trying to keep their old downtown alive, yet they're having other types of development on the south end.
You know, I'm not sure that anything is really changed from what we talked about in some areas identified when we discussed form-based code, but it was really based on what the general plan talked about. And the areas, you know, from this map that are ripe for some kind of that city urban center development or mixed use development would clearly be like where the old King's Market is, that area, which looks kind of run down looking right now, but there's potential there. And there will be a lot of people down there at some point. But also the area like behind Walgreens and out to like that whole field there behind Walgreens and out to 2700, out where the new auto parts store is. But that whole area was, I think, one that we really looked hard at for some kind of I forgot what we were calling it, but like a little city center area that had little businesses in there that, you know, with parking behind and things like that. And, you know, just to the west of there will be all of that new townhouse developments and all that kind of stuff. So those two areas, I think nothing has changed, that those would be the two key areas that would be ripe for this kind of development. And I think that is reflected in our current general plan.
You know, with that said, Commissioner, I know that there is some hesitancy among residents and city leaders with, you know, the form-based code, but maybe there's a property or a small section where development like this actually makes a lot of sense. Maybe it's Kings Plaza or North Ogden Plaza, and maybe that becomes like a test run where a project like this could actually work and see how it goes, but it's not done in a way that people feel like high density is overtaking the city.
I absolutely agree. And, you know, I think we should just lose the whole term form-based code, because I think that has a stigma attached to it now that nobody wants to hear. But the concept of this type of development that draws people in a small concentrated, just either one or two areas of the city here, I think the general plan fully supports that kind of development as it's currently written.
That's true. I was asked during the form-based code discussions, I got asked a lot, why are we even discussing this? This was just from, you know, people who hear about it. My answer was always, because every communication the city provided to the residents, they came back and they said they want walkability, right? So yeah, this accomplishes that goal. It's really hard to communicate. It was an attempt to give people what they want, right? Because they didn't want it. They didn't want it. But I think you're right. I think in a smaller, more digestible. I think we even heard those comments. I remember. I don't remember if it was Randy Wynn. I know he was very outspoken about it, but some residents were saying this would work in small sections, maybe one place. And we toyed with that idea, and I can't remember why we ended up kiboshing that altogether. But I think we did because it needs to, form-based code kind of needs to be holistic to work, right? You can't just have one plot of land with an alley that goes nowhere. Maybe that was what the death toll for it. I don't know.
Part of it was when we started looking at the form-based code, they tried to look at the whole North Ogden, Washington Boulevard from 2700 all the way down to 1700. And we tried to talk about just little parts here and there, and we couldn't get it focused that way. And I think you're right. Little pieces here and there. Kings Plaza would be really good to work with. It's got a lot to work with.
I don't want to put words in people's mouths, but when people were against form-based code, but I don't think they were against walkability and things like that. What I believe they were against was, hey, if we put cool stuff here, people are going to come here and we're going to grow, and we don't want so much growth. You know, we want the bedroom community. I think they want the bedroom community and the walkability. And I mean, I'm guessing here, but I think there's a fear that, hey, if we have these cool things, that's just going to draw people here. We don't want that.
Yeah, you know, I think
small town feel.
Yeah, I think also, you know, the holistic form-based code was almost just too much. And it seems like, if I recall, there was really a sense that it would limit developers to such a degree that it would drive them away, or it would put them off. You know what I mean? Like we were putting too many boundaries on it or something. It was just almost like too big of an animal to embrace. So, but the concept of this sort of this vision of these city centers or these walkability areas, I think is wonderful. And I think those two areas would be ripe for it, you know, before something else goes in there. How we would do that, I don't know. But it seems to me like in the general plan, you know, we talked about that downtown area, or we talked about, it seemed like it was more like the Smiths area, but it seemed like there was support for it in the general plan for this type of concept.
Any other thoughts on this right now? We have one more segment of the video to watch if you have the appetite for it.
How long is it, Evan?
My brain's dead.
Yeah, I'm fading.
It's 15 minutes.
Let's get a feel from the commission. Do we want to continue this discussion, or we are at 8:17. If we watch a 15-minute video, we're going to be past 8:30.
My brain's pretty tired.
We have a vote to
need some time to think about it.
You know, what we could do is send you a link to this video. It's on YouTube. So if you'd rather just watch it on your own. I mean, it's a link to the entire hour-and-a-half training, but we can tell you where to stop and start, so you can see this video on your own if you'd rather do it that way.
Evan, I want to mention to the rest of the Planning Commission too, that the General Plan Steering Committee is meeting again next week, next Wednesday. And this is one of the topics, because last meeting we kind of talked about that area just to the north of Lee's, whether, you know, the possibility of closing off Pleasant View Drive, doing something with the old fire station, expanding Centennial Park, trying to create a little bit of a hub there. And then that kind of is expanded into, you know, now what do we do? You know, what's the vision for the area to the south of 2700? And that's where mixed use, and this is exactly the topic that they're going to be talking about next week. So I don't know if anybody from the Planning Commission wants to, you know, join in. Meeting's at 6 o'clock, but the link, there'll be the Zoom link on the city site.
You know, Don, the problem they have, the old Public Works place, why they didn't do the Public Works there in the first place, because the cleanup's going to be horrendous.
Oh yeah,
they got to be really cleaned up. All the oil spills and that's going to cost quite a bit of money to do that.
Oh yeah,
that's one of the things that held up a lot of things taking place there.
Yep.
Okay.
Anyway, I just wanted to mention that so everybody had that kind of as a frame of reference too.
All right, Evan, thanks for leading that discussion. Those were some good ideas. I don't know if we landed on anything, but that wasn't the point really, right? It was education and discussion, and I think we accomplished that. So please send us that. If you guys will check your emails and follow up and finish the video on our own time. We can even discuss this in a future meeting when our actual fearless leader is back to guide that. Thank you. Evan. Anything else to add before I cut you off here?
No, but thank you. I think it was a great discussion. Appreciate all your thoughts.
Thank you. Okay. Any other remarks from planning commissioners about anything else?
I've said too much already.
Thank you. Okay. We did tell the public that we'd hold their comments for items on the agenda. We don't have a specific any action here, so we didn't call for any public comment. But if there is any public that wanted to speak to what we discussed for an hour and a half there, I'm welcome. I'm willing to entertain that. It's like we may only have one member of the public with us.
The mayor's still there.
Yeah.
And the other one is just listening.
Okay, great. Okay, so any remarks from our city manager or city attorney?
Nope. I just appreciate, the staff's willingness to educate. And I know, sometimes topics are difficult and there's a lot of different opinions, and, that's why you guys get paid the big bucks, is to make the tough decisions. So thank you for your time on this.
Thank you. Julian Berg, thank you for sticking with us, man. That was a rough
problem.
one. Yeah. Did you learn anything?
I don't think so. I've learned a bit of that in school, but Evan touched on it pretty well.
Okay. So we'll hope to be hearing more from you. And
thank you.
looking forward to working with you.
Yeah, thank you as well.
Okay. Welcome on. All right. With that, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn. I think we've covered everything on our agenda.
I'll make a motion that we adjourn.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second for adjournment. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Yeah, you can all leave now. This is the end.
Good night.
Bye.
See ya.
Good night.